This
So
conference will now be recorded.
my name is Dixon, and I've been working in this HL7 integration industry for the past 10 years, specifically into healthcare IT, building interfaces between different hospital systems, lab information systems, and also worked on other standards as well apart from HL7 like CCD, X12, FHIR, and other integrate and also on various other integration engines apart from Mirth Connect, which we are going to cover in this course. I also worked on Rhapsody. I also worked on Connector, Integration Buddy, Allscripts Interface Engine, and couple of more. So this training would be covering two parts mainly. First part would be for HL7, where we'll cover in detail about what is HL7, how the name has surfaced, and why the name HL7 has given, and other parts like what are the various message types, what is the content of the message type, what is the structure of the message, and all of these aspects from HL7 perspective. And in the second session, we'll be covering second part of the training. We'll be covering about Mirth integration engine, which we use to construct or generate an HL7 message from a database or interpret HL7 message that we receive from other systems, how we interpret them, how we write the information to the database, and all of these aspects. So these are the two parts of the training which we'll be covering. So we'll have a quick round of introduction, just to see, just to understand you better. So I just wanted to know what is your background? Have you worked on HL7 before or integrations before? And why exactly you're taking this training and what is the final goal that you're planning to achieve? So let's start with Bob.
Um, okay, I have a background, a little bit of a background in um, integration.
Hmm.
I worked at a hospital here in Dallas, and we used we used what is it? Cloverleaf was our integration engine, and
Okay.
I've been experimenting with a little bit with the engine that we're going to use in your class, but my experience is minimal, so I'm just trying to gain a better knowledge in that field.
Sure. Great. Great. Thank you, Bob. Sam, let's go to Sam. Sam, could you introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, hi. My name is Sam. I've actually haven't really worked directly with the integrations, but I've worked in the EHR industry, and I currently work in that industry as well. So I currently do implementation for the EHR for behavioral health software.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cloud-based. I worked in a hospital, children's hospital, where I did get some exposure of HL7. I was the
Mm-hmm.
liaison of a lab interface.
Okay.
We've used Cerner and Epic. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so the EHR that we used at our hospital uh, was a rural-based hospital. So it was a very small EHR that we've connected. So we did a bi-directional interface. So I don't know which specific engine was used because I was more like a liaison on the back end.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I did get some exposure of how the HL7 looks like with the language and the segments and but I would like to get more knowledge and kind of like get some more understanding.
Sure. Sure. Sounds great. All right. So I think we have Manohat as well, who just joined. Hey, Manohat, how are you? Manohat, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hey, Manohat,
I
how are
can.
you?
I can hear you. I'm fine, sir.
Great, great. Can you give quick introduction about yourself? We will then
Yeah, sir.
kickstart the
As
session.
I message you, I am a B.Tech guy and I have 3 years of experience in healthcare domain.
Mm-hmm.
Currently working as a implementation engineer in a Paras hospital in Gurgaon. Now looking for some growth and becomes an interface developer. Want to learn HL7 integration
Okay,
engineering.
okay, sure. Thank you. Thank you guys for joining today. So we'll start the session. So this in this first session, we will be looking at few aspects like where do we hear the term HL7 and where does it come into picture? We'll cover other aspects like what is hospital workflow, why and how the name HL7 has come into picture, and we'll also look at what is the role of interfaces and what is HL7 structure. The basic outline of the HL7 structure, how it has been built, and all of those aspects. So before getting into the session, I there are a few terms I want you guys to be aware of. So PM is nothing but a practice management system, which is usually used by the receptionist or the front desk manager who would register the patients. So that application is called as PM, which is used to capture patient demographic data and other. Manawat, can you be on mute?
Manohar,
There's a lot of
Manohar,
Yes,
background noise.
mute. Manohar, can you please mute yourself? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So EHR is electronic health record, which is the application used to store the clinical information of the patient. As you all are from healthcare, a little background. So I think you people are aware of EHR more, where patient-related clinical data is stored, which includes patient's allergies, patient appointments, uh, other clinical data like results, medications administered, and various other aspects of the patients are stored in the EHR. HI is Hospital Information System, which includes integration between PM and EHR within the hospital. And LIS is Lab Information System, which includes integration of hospitals as well as laboratories out there, whoever the laboratory it is. So they integrate with the labs and they form an ecosystem kind of thing called as Lab Information System. Then ICD, which is International Classification of Diseases. So each and every disease out there has a code, and that code is managed or governed by a body called as ICD. So currently we are running with ICD version 10, which includes almost each and every disease, and each and every disease has a code through which we can identify that particular disease. Then CPT is current procedural terminology, which is to identify what type of procedure has been performed once certain disease is identified for the patient. So we have list of CPTs there as well, a list of CPT codes there as well. So which will indicate various types of procedures. Then CCD is of care document. So this is like an entire clinical summary of a patient for a visit that he has, or a summary of his entire clinical history. So it is based out of two types. One is based on a visit, and the other one is based on the patient which includes where the patient includes the entire clinical history irrespective of the visits that he has. When we talk about CCD from a visit perspective, that includes the clinical data of one particular visit. And HI is Health Information Exchange. So this is an ecosystem where one or two or more hospitals are interconnected with each other and share the patient data for greater medical care to the patient. And also, doctors can be aware of what is the clinical history of the patient from a different hospital. So that sharing of data is enabled with the help of HI. Then IHE is Integrating Health Enterprise, which is kind of a standard. It's not Yeah, it's a kind of a standard which is used in order to form an ecosystem in healthcare information exchange, HI. So when we do HI implementations, we follow IHE standards, which includes various aspects like ITA 45, ITA 41, ITI 55, 53. So there are many profiles within IHE, which are the standards which we use to integrate various hospitals with HI. So we'll look more about HI towards the end of the session after completing Mirth integration engine. The reason why I include about CCTs and HIs is apart from HL7, there are other standards in the industry which we use to perform various integrations. So we will cover more on those at the later part of the session, just to give you a bird's eye view of what all out there in the market are used in order to perform various types of integrations. So we'll quickly start with hospital workflow. So I hope you guys are already aware of the flow. So I'll quickly run through it. So we know that whenever a patient visits the hospital, he visits the registration system or the front desk, and he gets himself registered there. So the receptionist would ask whether it's a new patient or an up, or whether he has been to the hospital already. If he has been to hospital already, then the receptionist would ask to check whether the existing details which are there are correct or not. If something has to be updated, they will go ahead and update it. So the data that is captured, like name, date of birth, gender, insurance information, and all of these are called as demographics, referred to as demographics in one single term. Once that is done, a receptionist will go ahead and ask which doctor they want to meet, and they will schedule an appointment for the doctor. So doctors are uh, called as providers. Basically, in our terms, when we talk about healthcare terms, they're called as providers. So now, once the patient appointment is scheduled, then the patient visits the doctor, and the patient meets the doctor, and that situation where patient meets the doctor is called as an encounter. So usually we refer an appointment as an encounter when we are talking in real terms during the implementations. Once doctor meets the patient, doctor will discuss with the patient, try to figure out what is the problem the patient has, and will try to diagnose just by looking at him, if possible. If not, then they will place an order to to get further evaluation done, like performing some tests like urine test, CBC, or other tests. Once they place an order, that order is sent to the laboratory electronically, and lab will receive that order and will send back the results based on the test that has been indicated. They will send back the results to the provider. Then the patient comes back to the doctor, gets evaluated, and doctor will perform whatever treatment they have to give to the patient, whether it is an injection or medicine. They will give it, and patient will leave the uh, hospital. And once that is done, patient will the charges related to the patient's encounter as well as charges related to the lab are sent back to the receptionist, and from there receptionist will decide whether they have to send this send this amount and claim this amount from an insurance company, or claim it from the patient directly. So both the scenarios are possible. If patient doesn't have an insurance, then receptionist will go ahead and get that amount directly from the patient, which is done way before the encounter usually. Else, if the patient has an insurance, then they will go ahead and send that claim to the insurance company and get that claim settled. So to perform that, they have they might have different billing office, or they might have same office within the same premises. So that's a different story altogether, how claims work, how claims are settled. But For our part, we just need to understand that there will be a billing aspect where the bills are generated and claims are settled. The reason why I take through this hospital workflow is when we talk about HL7, what are the various message types that we have in HL7, we mainly get back to the same blueprint. This hospital workflow acts as a blueprint to break down the events and to understand what kind of message types will be used in this entire workflow. So most of the times we'll be coming back discussing about hospital workflow again and related to the real-time HL7 events and how those HL7 events actually play part in this workflow that we have discussed just now. So we'll look at that. We'll come back here again. For now, we need to understand. So now we will try to understand why do we need HL7. So let us take a quick example. Let us say we have three different people. One is from US, one is from India, one is from China. All of them have their own regional language. US US guy speaks English, Indian guy speaks some other Hindi or some other regional language, and then Chinese guy speaks Chinese. So if these three people have to talk to each other, either they have to learn the language of the other person, like if the US guy and Indian guy has to talk to each other, they have to either Indian guy has to learn English or the US guy has to learn Hindi. And same applies to the other way. If any one of these people have to communicate with each other, then they have to end up in learning the language of the other person. If the Indian guy has to communicate both with US guy and Chinese guy, he has to learn English as well as Chinese. So here, this Indian guy is ending up in learning two different languages, which is a tedious process, and without that, communication is not possible. So what happened is, so globally, they have come up with an idea of having a common language, which is in English. So now, any person from any country or any place, they have decided that we'll have English as one standard language, which we will use in order to communicate with each other. So in that way, now every person from every country has to learn only one additional language, not all of them. So in earlier scenario, we saw that the Indian guy has to learn English as well as Chinese. Chinese guy has to learn Hindi as well as English. The Indian US guy has to learn Hindi as well as Chinese. That has been eliminated, and there is only one standard now. Now anyone can speak only one language, which is English, and that can be understood by anyone out there, whether it is from two different countries or 10 different countries. So that has emerged as a common language, and it's being used to communicate between different people out there. HL7 also works similarly that way. Let us see why. So now, when we talk about, we just saw that in hospital workflow, we have practice management, we have electronic health record, and we also have labs. So when we look at practice management, the patient data is registered within practice management, but it has eventually should be flowing from practice management to electronic health record so that the doctor can see who is the patient, what are his details, and what are the appointments doctor has can also be seen in the electronic health record. But for this to happen, um, before HL7, without HL7, there is only one way. Extract the data from the database, which has a different architecture on the PM side, and then the integration person, whoever is integrating PM and EHR, or in fact any other system, they have to understand the architecture of the other database, which is electronic health record, and then insert the data into the other database. So this is one-to-one mapping or one-to-one integration where the practice management can be integrated with electronic health record, and the engineer, whoever is performing the integration, has to understand in depth what is the architecture of PM database and what is the architecture of EHR database. So if it is one database, then that's fine. But eventually in real-time scenario, we'll see that it is not just one-to-one integration. They might end up in having another integration with labs between PM and the lab, or between electronic health record and lab. So if the engineer has to perform integration between electronic health record and lab, now he has to understand the lab database architecture as well. So in this way, the engineer has to keep going on learning or understand the architecture of other databases in order to insert the data from one system and extract the data from one system and insert it in another system. So this is kind of a tedious and very time consuming process where the time of the engineer will be consumed more to understand the architecture than to perform integration. So there is no basic common language. That is where HL7 has come into picture. So now HL7 has emerged as a common standard language which they will be using in order to communicate between PM and EHR. So PM will go ahead and so what happens here eventually when HL7 has come into picture, entire data that is extracted from database will be converted to HL7 and that will be sent out to the electronic health record. And when it is sent out to electronic health record, as it is HL7 is a common language, we will consume that HL7. That HL7 message will be consumed on EHR side. As it is a common language, it will be understood by the EHR and that will be interpreted and the data will be inserted into the database. So the main difference is on PM side. So the main difference is HL7 before HL7, the integration engineer has to understand the database architecture of the other system that they are integrating with. Now, in this scenario, once HL7 is up, PM or the engineer can generate the HL7 messages from the PM system and just send them over. They don't need to bother about what is the architecture of the other side, whether it is electronic health record or whether it is lab information system or any other system. In fact, they can connect with any other 10 systems out there. They just need to generate the HL7. As HL7 is the common medium of communication between healthcare related applications, the applications on the other side would understand HL7, consume it, and insert the data into their own databases. Then, how this communication happens is the question. So basically, we build bridges between PM and EHR. So these bridges will go ahead and help us to send the data from PM to EHR or EHR to lab or lab to any other billing system or PM system again. And this whole ecosystem will be formed by interconnecting these applications with the help of creating a bridge. And that bridge is called as an interface. So a bridge is a bridge where data from PM to EHR is sent, and this communication happens through HL7, and that bridge is referred to as an interface, which is enabling the data flow from one system to another system. So, any questions here so far? All right. So we'll jump to the um, quick few facts about HL7. So it has been established back in 1987 as a standard. It emerged out as a standard in 1987, and which helped in a lot of uh, s- exchanges between various platforms and various applications, and also it supports various managements and deliveries and evaluation of healthcare services. So the term HL7 basically it is used for as part of the uh, healthcare open system. not healthcare, but basically systems, open system interconnection, which is an OSI model where you'll have 7 layers within OSI model. So OSI, you can research more about OSI. I'll give a quick introduction about it. But OSI layers are 7 layers which will actually enable the communication between one system to the other. So whatever I'm talking right now is actually physically converted into packets and that is being sent to you, which is why you are able to listen to what I'm talking. So that process is basically done with the help of OSI layers. So you'll have a quick introduction about OSI layers, but if you want a deep research, you can go ahead and do that. The term HL7 has come into picture from there because whatever we generate, HL7 messages are mostly operated in the seventh layer of the OSI layers, which is why we call as health level 7. So that is how the name has been derived. And HL7 is used in more than 28 countries as of today. So there are many other countries who are using HL7 as their common medium of communication between healthcare related applications. So we have many countries who are using it like Argentina, Australia, China, France, and many other countries out there in the world. So each country has their own HL7 standard websites that you can refer to if you want to. Most of the countries have their own, but the fact is that the standards remain more or less same. Only the so in case if there is any regional specific aspects, then they are added to the standards. But more or less it would be the same structure and same standard which is being used. And all of these are governed by HL7 International, and they will manage all the HL7 websites which are specific to the countries. So as I said just now, why the name HL7? So in OSI model we have 7 layers: application, presentation, session, transport, network, data link, and physical. So whatever we are seeing in the front end when we are using a Word document, or when we are looking at a website, we have something on the website, on the web page. So once we look at the web page, we understand that there is something that is being shown in the front page. Apparently, that is not the actual page which is relying on our system. We are getting that from some other server which is out there in the internet. How that is happening? So the application that we are seeing is basically, or whatever the data that we are seeing within that application is basically converted into physical packets in the final layer, and those packets will pass through the hardware or the internet connection, Wi-Fi connection that you have, and those packets are sent to the server that you are trying to communicate to. For example, if you type Gmail, you get a lot of Gmail content. You see your emails, you see your contacts, and all of those things. Actually, that are not relying on your laptop or your system. It is actually relying on a server which is out there in the internet. So when you raise a request, when you click type gmail.com, that request is going through your internet wire in the form of physical packets, which we can touch, or and not literally touch, but apparently what I'm saying is those packets are real-time physical packets which are transmitted through the hardwire that is connected to the laptop or the system, and those packets travel through that wire and then reach the server, and server will receive your request and will respond back with the packets. Those physical packets will come back to you and hit the physical layer, which is the first layer, and from there those packets are again interpreted and finally presented to the application layer. So that is the main work of OSI layers. For HL7, we play with HL7 within an application. So that application operates on the seventh layer, which is the application layer, which is why we call it as HL7, which is health level 7. So a quick overview about HL7, like any other language, HL7 has its own standards, its own grammar and syntax, which we will look at. So version 3.2.3 One has 12 chapters and 5 appendices. Apart from that, we have latest versions like 2.5, 2.7, version 3 as well. Version 3 is not widely accepted in the market because of its complexity and complete change of the architecture of how HL7 message looks. We see that people are still comfortable and still using version 2.5, 2.3, and 2.7 in the market, and not welcoming version 3 a lot. We'll see that out of 100% implementations, only 5 to 10 might be with version 3. And then we have more than 50 data types and more than 80 message types and more than 86 event types within HL7. So these are from 2.3 and above. We'll see that we have all of these aspects. We'll look at few data types as part of the training. Almost 35-40 data types will be covered, which are the most common one that will be used, and we'll be covering the most important message types which are part of the hospital workflow that we discussed. And then we'll be covering few event types as well. And then history of HL7. So FHIR is the latest standard. So it's not HL7, but FHIR fire is termed as fire, called as fire usually. So FHIR is used to integrate wearable devices and also mobile devices and also tabs and various other handy devices can be integrated with the help of FHIR. They have REST services as the resources. That's a different language altogether, or different standard altogether. Then we have version 3. As I said, this is released in June 2015, but this is not widely accepted by the industry. And then we had 2.5, 2.4, 2.3, 2.7 as well, released sometime in 2009s and 10s. So 2.7 is also being used right now, along with 2.5 and 2.3. But all of this standard, as a standard, emerged in 97, but the use has been in the market from 1987 itself. So it has taken 10 years to accept the language by the healthcare industry and say that yes, we will have this as a standard language of communication between various applications that we have. Then we look at the advantages of HL7. So it will help us to share medical or demographic and billing data with HL7 enabled applications. And it will help data transfer in the form of messages. There are no special tools which are required apart from one interface engine which we will use to extract database, generate or construct HL7 messages, and send it over to the destination. And it is an ASCII formatted code which is human readable, which you can just see and understand. If you are aware of the HL7 standards, you can understand what is the content of that HL7 and read it and try to interpret that message. And it is completely OS independent. As it works on the application layer, it works on any OS. So it is not specific that it has to be used in Windows or Mac or Linux or Unix. It can operate in any operating system out there. And it can connect from any system to any system. As we know, as we have discussed before, it will help you to connect from one application to another application. Irrespective of understanding the other application's architecture or the database architecture, we just need to, if we are the sender, we just need to generate the HL7 message and send it over to the destination. Destination will go ahead and interpret that HL7 message, as that is a common medium of standard or language that the other systems also understand. So HL7 also assists in to access the overseas market. Basically, a lot of accessibility will increase because of HL7, as they can communicate with each other by integrating various systems. Then why do we need standards? So the major edge of using a standard is they don't need to understand the architecture of other application. As I said before, whoever is working on integrations, they just need to extract the data and generate an HL7 message, which is a standard. So this standard will help them to communicate with other systems irrespective of understanding the other systems, database architecture and all. So this will enable sharing of medical data a lot. And then we'll get accessibility to larger subset of data, and insurance claims are and payments are done very quickly, and we have interoperability as enabled between these systems, as applications can talk to each other basically by communicating with the help of HL7. Not only HL7, we have other standards like X12 CCD, as I said before. So those will help to communicate between various applications and enable interoperability. So, and apart from that, we have greater safety for the patient and greater quality, which is a lot more. And this HL7 is accredited to HL7 organization, which is an HL7 international organization who will manage, release the new standards, who will manage and take care of documentation, how HL7 implementations has to work, and all of these things. It has been accredited to HL7 organization international. So that forms a body and manages all of these things. And obviously, we'll have a bigger market as we can communicate with multiple systems out there in the market. So let us look at how HL7 messaging works. So now we will connect back or we will look back to the hospital workflow that we have discussed. So we saw that patient visits the hospital and talks to the receptionist. Receptionist will ask whether they are visiting for the first time or they have been there before. And if it is for the first time, they will grab or they will capture entire demographic related information like first name, last name, date of birth, insurance, and all of these things, and then register or save that patient details in the PM system. Now this data has to flow over to EHR so that doctor can also have the demographic information. It doesn't make sense for doctor to enter the same information again. So this data that is captured in the PM system has to flow over to the EHR. So there has been a necessity that has come into play where the data has to flow from PM system to the EHR system. So this event that is taking place at the front end, which is the event which we are referring to here, is patient visiting the receptionist and getting himself registered there. And this, once they save that patient data, that concludes an event there. So patient will, that event which has took place in the front end has generated the necessity of data flow from PM system to the HR system. So this event is called as a trigger event. So trigger event is nothing but a real world event where the necessity of data flow has been generated uh, from one system to the other system. So that particular event is referred to as trigger event. HL7 majorly works based on these events that takes place in the entire workflow that we discussed. So if you look back at the hospital workflow, we have many events like patient getting registered, patient getting his appointment scheduled or canceling his appointment, or meeting the doctor is an event, and doctor placing an order is an event. So basically there are many events that are involved within the hospital workflow that we discussed. So those events has generated the necessity of data flow from one system to the another system, which is why it is called as a trigger event, because it is triggering something, and because that's an event which is triggering the necessity of data flow from one system to the another system. So we'll look more on what are the various events that we have, how can we break down the entire hospital workflow into smaller events, and then subsequently into micro events so that we can look at them to see what are the possibilities that we have and how those events are indicated or named in the from HL7 perspective. So that is how we will go through the entire training. We'll be looking at what are the various events and what are the HL7 messaging standards for each event that is happening in the real-time world. So if you quickly look at from broader perspective, as soon as patient visits the hospital, we will have that registration as one event, scheduling appointments as another event, and labs as another one, and charges as another one, or pharmacies and insurances as the other one. So these are the five major events that you will see from a bigger perspective, but each of these are again divided into separate events, which we'll look at in next session when we deep dive into what is the each event for each aspects that we are looking at here. We'll be looking at registration, appointment, labs, and charges because these will be using HL7 as the standard. However, we won't be looking at insurances and pharmacies because they will be use a different standard altogether, which is called as X12 and ERX. So we won't be looking at that as that is not covered in this training content. So let us look at an anatomy of a message. So we'll quickly jump into one small example. Let us see, let us say that we have a rack, and within rack we have first rack will have clothes and second rack will have books. Third rack will also have list of books. So let us say we have two people in a house and that rack is present in that house. When one person is going out, he forgot something. Let's say he forgot his t-shirt within the house and he went out. Now he calls the other person who is at home and he tells him that, hey, can you get me that t-shirt? This second person who is at home will grab the t-shirt which is present in first rack and first compartment of that rack, will take that particular t-shirt and will go to the person and give it, whoever is outside. Now here if you observe, there is no communication between these two person on where the location is, where did he put his t-shirt and all. But whoever was in the house understands or know that the t-shirts are present in first compartment of first rack, which is why the person who is at home was able to go out and grab the t-shirt and give it to the second person who is out there. HL7 also works very similar to that way. There is no communication about where we store what data in within HL7 because either persons who are involved in integrations know that there are certain placeholders for each and every data element that is captured, that is used within this hospital workflow that discussed. For example, if you take a look at name, every HL7 resource or every person who is involved in integration knows that HL7 name is indicated or name has a specific placeholder within HL7 message, and the first person whoever is integrating with the second person don't need to explicitly tell where the patient name is located. So we'll look at that in a while. Once we look at the message, you will understand that more. But the concept behind it is they don't discuss, I mean, they don't need to explicitly let the other person know. If they understand HL7, they don't need to tell them where the name is, where the date of birth is. So it also has very similar structure as we have seen in this example. Another example is as soon as there is a power off at our home, what we'll do, even if it is dark in the night, first thing that we do is we just walk up to a place where we know that we keep our candle or a torch and we just lit it up. Even if we don't know, even if we can't see anything in the house, we just walk up there because we know that the location of that particular torch or candle is every house. In every house, usually we have one specific location where we store it. So knowing where it is or basically having a specific dedicated place for that particular item is the key here. HL7 also works in a very similar way, how we'll take a look in a while. So if you look at the anatomy of the HL7 message, each message has a segment. It has one to many segments, and each segment is divided into fields. Each field is divided into components, and each component is divided into subcomponents. So if we look at that, if we compare with the previous example that we have seen about the rack and what are the compartments that we have within the rack, so we can compare it to that. We can say that we have each segment can be compared to one rack and each field can be compared to one compartment. So each field will hold specific data element. For example, if we talk about name, name is present between any of the fields that we are seeing here. One field will indicate one data element. And further fields are broken down into components and subcomponents. Like in within name, we'll have first name and last name. So these are two different components altogether. So if we say that field number 2 is for name, within field number 2, we again have two components. And these two components will have first name and last name as first component and second component. These components are again divided into subcomponents, which we'll be looking at when we really look at the HL7 messages. But for now, just we need to understand till fields and components. Further, we'll break down the messages based on the real-time message that we are going to look at. So just to review, each message will have segments, each segment will have fields, and each field will have components. And each component is again divided into subcomponents. So that is the architecture or tree of how uh, HL7 message formulates. So as like any other language, when I told you in the beginning that HL7 has its own grammar and syntax. In English, if you look at, we have spaces, we have full stops, we have comma, and those punctuations are used to write and so that the reader, whoever is reading it, can read it properly and understand it properly. So in a similar way, for HL7, it has its own punctuations and language, and they are called as message delimiters. So we can compare few of them with our regular language that we have, but I'll try to make it easy. So segment terminator is like full stop, where it will indicate that a segment has been terminated. So we might have multiple segments within one HL7 message. So each segment is terminated with the help of CR, which is a segment terminator. CR is nothing but carriage return. In program terms, we call it as a terminator to indicate that a line has been completed. And then field separator is like space between two words that we have in a sentence. So it will separate each word. As a space separates each word, field separate will separate each field. It's like a compartment wall, which is separating two different compartments. So that each compartment can have a specific type of information in there. In the same way, field separator within two pipes, a pipe symbol is used to indicate as a field separator. So between two pipes, we will have some sort of data within that. For example, the name is stored between two pipes. And then component separator. Component separator is basically used to separate two components within field. So if we hold the data within two pipes as one field, and within that we'll have a component separator to separate two components of one field. And then we have ampersand, which will be used as subcomponent separator. So this is also used within a field where we will see that components are again broken down into subcomponents. Repetition separator, we will look at this one as well in the real-time messages when we are discussing that, when we are discussing especially about PID segment, patient identification. Basically, it indicates that there is some repetitive element within that particular field that we are discussing. So, especially used in situations like where we have multiple phone numbers or which is a repetitive data. So that in that scenario, we'll see that we'll be using tilde. This is called as tilde and inverted S to separate to uh, basically not to separate, but to indicate that there is some sort of repetition of data within one field. Escape character is used as backward slash. So this is This indicates that the data, whatever data is present after that slash, has to be ignored by the interface engine or the interpreter, whoever it is. If you are reading, if I'm reading the message, I will understand that one, if I have a backslash within the message, then whatever is present after that backslash has to be ignored within that field. So these are the message delimiters which we will be using. So let us quickly take a look at sample HL7 message, how it looks. So this is how a sample HL7 message looks. We see that there are 5 segments here: MSH, EVN, PID, NK1 and PV1. So each segment has its own name. First 3 words or first 3 alphabets or terms will indicate what that segment is for. Each segment has its own name, and each segment is separated with the help of, at the end you will see that each segment is separated with the help of carriage return. A carriage return cannot be seen in the normal text, normal notepad. You will be able to see that in notepad plus plus. So when you actually let me quickly show that. So if you look at a sample HL7 message, we will be able to see. So this is a sample HL7 message. This is notepad plus plus that we are seeing here. So this notepad plus plus will have this option where it says show all characters. So when we click on show all characters, at the end of each segment we will see a carriage return, which indicates that that's an end of the segment. So from our example, we see that we have multiple segments: EVN, PID, NK1, PV1. So how do we read this? So if you look at this HL7 message in detail, we see that these pipes are separating each field. So this is like the compartment wall that we discussed just now. Okay. So each pipe is separating the data element, and between 2 pipes, we have one specific data. For example, just to make it easy, we'll take only about name so that we can understand it better. So if you look at the name here, we have test Daniel Amari as a name. So when we want to read it, we read it as this is PID segment, which is patient identification, and each compartment or each field will have a number. So this is first field, this is second field, this is third field, this is the fourth one, and this is the fifth field. So in PID segment, fifth field is always dedicated for name. So in that way, whenever someone is reading the message, they will say that in PID 5 we have a name. And within PID 5, we have that there are 2 components which are separated with the help of component separator, which is the character. So this is separating the last name from first name. So if you review back again, each segment, we have 5 different segments here, many segments in fact, but we are just looking at PID so that we can have the basic understanding. So PID is patient identification segment, as I said, and each segment will have multiple fields. So each field is separated with the help of a field separator, which is pipe, and the data is held between 2 pipes, and that is called as a field. So this is field number 1, this is field number 2, 3, 4, and 5. Field number 5 in PID segment is always dedicated to name. If name is not seen, if name is not present, then you send it as blank, but you don't send some other information in there. Field number 2 is dedicated for patient ID. Field number 3 is also dedicated for patient ID. And 4 is dedicated from something else. 5 is dedicated for name, and so on. So we have various placeholders for various data elements that we actually get in the real time. So within insurance, we have insurance company name, insurance phone number, insurance group number, and various other aspects. So each of those pieces of data will have some data field within the HL7 message. So we'll be looking at all of them one by one. What are the important fields that we usually use in the real-time implementations for each various segments and each various message types that we have. Okay, so reading it this way is little difficult because just pasting it in a notepad and saying reading it as, if you want to look at name, we just read it as number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it will become difficult for us to read it this way. So we have few tools which we can leverage, like HL7 Quick View and HL7 Inspector or HL7 Spy. So there are various tools out there. Or as another tool is called as Smart View HL7. Let me quickly pull up that and show that to you. So these tools are used so that that will break the entire HL7 message for us by default, so that we don't end up in counting and reading what what the message type is doing. So this is Smart View HL7, which is free. You can go ahead and download it. You can just click on the sample, load that sample, and it will break the entire HL7 message for you. So here we are saying we have, once we did load the HL7 message, it is showing me in detail what this message is. So it is saying that, so if you look at PID, we were looking at PID. So it is breaking each field separately for me, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it is breaking the data elements and it is showing the information present in each field. If you want to further break it down, it does that as well. If you highlight the name, it is on the right hand side, it is showing all the components that are available within that name. Okay, so we can use this tool in order to interpret HL7 messages and understand it better instead of we reading one by one. So if you want, you can download Smart View HL7, but there are, as I said, there are other tools as well, like HL7 Inspector, HL7 Quick View, and so on. So let me show you Quick View as well quickly. So this is HL7 Quick View. So if we go back, here we go. All right. So I prefer more Smart View because it is automatically doing it. Here I have to break each individual segments, and take a look at, and collapse each of those fields and to take a look at. So here we have, as I said, so that is how an HL7 message is read. As I said, with the help of segment name and the field number. So that is how HL7 messages are read, or during the process of real-time implementation, we use that notation. Or let's say if I want to tell you that in PID 5.1 I am sending so and so, and then as an HL7 engineer, you will understand that we are talking about name, because PID 5.1 is dedicated for name. So that concludes our today's session. So we'll be looking at, in the second session, we'll be looking at what are the various events that we have, how HL7 has its own name for its own events, and what are the various events possible, and what are the names of each of those events, and what are the message content, what are the various segments for each event that we have. For example, if it's a new patient, we have MSH, EVN, PID, NK1, and PV1. But if it is an appointment, the number of segments, as well as we might not be seeing NK1 in PA in an appointment message. We will be seeing few other additional segments in the appointment message, and so on. So in that way, we'll have various things coming up with various types of messages, and what are the content of the messages will also change based on the message type and the segments that we are going to use. So we'll be covering them in the further sessions that we have. Any questions from anyone?
I have a quick question for you, Dixon.
Sure.
Um, do you are we be able to covering like how to connecting to like an EHR, like if there's an open source EHR, like would we be able to connect like using the HL7 like the interface? Is that going to be also touch base or?
Yes, yes, we'll be doing that, but we will not be connecting to OpenEHR. I mean, I don't have any database, but I have created a demo EHR, which will include various tables, as you can see. You
Okay,
can see on the screen, right?
right, the
So this
SQL
is a
database.
yeah. So I have created a sample demo database, which will include various data types like allergies and what we usually have in the in an EHR. So we will be connecting to this database, extracting the data from the database, and I'll show you how to construct the entire HL7 message based on the data that we pull out from the database. So that will be falling in the second part when we talk about Mirth integration engine. So one
Okay,
of the profile that I am going to cover is how we extract data from database and construct HL7 message. And another profile that we are going to cover is how we interpret that HL7 message and write the data to the database.
okay. How about the devices? Is that also going to be touch based or
Devices in the sense,
like any medical devices where you want to connect, using the HL7 language to your EHR or vice versa? That's more complex.
we don't have real-time devices. I mean, as I said, I
I mean,
don't have
I mean,
real-time.
architect would kind of explain if that would be okay. But I mean, just a thought. Is that something you touch base or?
Sure. I mean, I can help you with if you have any device that you want to connect to, I can definitely help you with that.
Okay, but
I
you
can.
don't teach them in the training or.
No, in training, we'll be just looking at this demo EHR database that we have.
Okay,
As part of the training, we'll be mostly working with this particular database.
okay,
But
gotcha.
we
Okay,
provide, but usually we provide guidance. Whoever usually goes through the training definitely have some or the other work at their office. So usually I keep guiding them on how to perform implementations and all. So one of the trainee wanted to work with Teradata, which is a
mm-hmm.
database repository for storing huge data. So I was guiding them on how they can connect to Teradata, how they can extract data from the database, how to interpret
Okay,
HL7 messages there. So that's the usual process that we follow.
okay,
But
all
for
right,
our working, our practical demos and
okay,
all, we'll be mostly looking at this database.
okay, great.
Any other questions, Bob or Manohar?
No, I don't have any. Uh, Thank you for the presentation.
Hello,
Yeah, sir. Yeah,
hello.
Manohar. Thank you, Bob.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah, Manohar, tell
Actually, I
me.
have created a channel in Mirth.
Uh-huh.
Sir, actually, I have created a channel in Mirth for getting lab data from MySQL and
Mm-hmm.
want to write in a file as a HL7 message.
Okay.
I am stuck where there are multiple repeating segments.
Okay.
That's where I am stuck. Can you help me for this?
Yes, yes, absolutely. We'll be covering of how to write loops, how to extract data from database for multiple orders, and how we generate multiple OBR segments or multiple segments wherever it is needed.
Yeah.
So yes, we'll be covering that.
I also want to one thing ask how much JavaScript level required for doing them? Actually, I am some basic idea of programming, not expert level.
Yeah, we have two sessions on JavaScripting, which is very basic, so that I covered the topics which we'll be using in Mirth integration engine. So
Okay.
yes, we'll be covering that, but that's not very in depth. Just to let you know, we'll be covering the basic aspects of it, um, so that you can use that scripting knowledge in order to script something within the Mirth integration engine.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, Bob, you have a question?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to ask
Hmm.
if someone is interested in becoming an integration analyst,
Hmm.
excuse me, um,
No problem.
do we have, is the information here conducive to that, like for integration analyst um, professions?
Yes, absolutely. For HL7 integration analyst, this content covers everything. So we
Okay.
cover everything with respect to HL7. We will be covering ADT, SIU, ORM. So we basically will be covering all the message types from HL7 perspective,
Hmm.
which is more of theoretical. And the second part, which includes entire practical sessions where we will be seeing how to construct each of these message types that we covered in the HL7 sessions. So we have a lot of
I think you got cut off there.
Yeah. I think you faded out a little bit. That's okay though. Hello, Mr. Dixon.
Hello.
Yeah, I can't hear anything either. Hello, Mr. Dixon. Are you there?